Jeff, you're with NV Energy. I know you work a lot with these guys in the data center industry. What's been kind of, what are the hot areas, if you will, to be able to launch or to be able to establish data centers here in Nevada?
Well, hey, David, I appreciate the opportunity to be here on behalf of NV Energy and my small but mighty little business development team. But I have to say, I think we've seen some pretty good success over the last couple of years in this industry throughout the state, and certainly down in southern Nevada. We have the new Google data center in Henderson that's coming out of ground and taking shape out there. It's been a lot labor of love and lots of fun to work with those folks. We have a quick shout out to our friends at Cirrus Data Services, a division of Gardner, Jim Jeffries and Dan Stewart. They're doing a project out in North Las Vegas at the Miners Mesa Industrial Park. So we're seeing, and we're talking to a lot of other folks. So we're pretty optimistic this is going to be a growing industry. I pulled a bit of, or I had, not me, I had somebody smarter than me on my team pull together some NAICS codes and some growth rates in this industry over the last 5 years. And it looks to be right around 13%. If you're looking at the code that represents kind of data processing, hosting, and related services. So kind of a big bucket there, but nonetheless, we're seeing some pretty good growth, and we anticipate seeing more.
Just to kind of set the scene for data centers, first off, Mark, help us out here. There's some of us that, we get it. It's a big building with servers in it. I've seen Silicon Valley, and I know you and I had a data center conference back in Chicago. This was some years ago. And if you can just kind of give a lay of the land, what the heck are these things? Why do we need them? Why are they so critical to our economy today?
Sure. I think one of the things for those that didn't know a lot about data centers, they've been forced to understand them very quickly with this COVID. Everyone's working from home. So bandwidth has intensified the ability to be able to communicate and continue to try to do business. So I think as companies that thought they didn't have to worry about their IT, those companies have had to quickly adapt to accelerate maybe some of their deployments to cloud or to some of these ways of WebEx, Zoom, you name it, to be able to kind of continue their business. What this is an ability to just communicate, to be able to transact. The buildings themselves, where are they built? Why are they built where they're built? They use a lot of power. So obviously, Jeff knows that, when a company is looking to build a data center, it's like building a small town, because the amount of power that's needed to run these data centers, to cool these data centers is immense. And the ability to offset some of the cost of that cooling through free cooling. So the desert, Phoenix, Utah, Vegas certainly are good areas where you can really lower your total costs from a power perspective through free cooling. And then the connectivity. I mean, you could have all the power in the world, but if you cannot connect the people to the rest of the world, that's also a challenge. So obviously, from a data center deployment, you want to get close to where the network is, so that you don't have latency issues. It probably wasn't long ago where you'd be watching a flick, and then you'd get the circle of doom, and that's basically latency and trying to catch up. So that's kind of what the data center looks for. They're these big boxes that are heavily secured, heavily powered, and have a great connectivity ability to connect companies. Raul, you're on the line. Raul also works with me, part of the Western region here. He's based out of San Francisco, the Silicon Valley, where a lot of these companies exist. So, Raul, I don't know if you have any further comments about that.
No, I think you nailed it. I mean, generally, the only thing I'd say is there are key attributes, and Mark spoke to them, that are generally there. But then one of the big things to understand in the backdrop is just think of all the different apps you use. It has to be able to reach their customers. So oftentimes, a large, think of anything out there, an Uber, they are all over the United States, but they generally break things into regions. So if you're generally doing a data center or a large footprint in the Western United States, the central United States and the eastern United States. So they tend to be clustered so they can service their customer base. That's the only thing I'd add.
And could you guys give us an idea of what from a real estate value on an annual basis for new construction? What are we talking about in terms of numbers? I mean, how much is this industry, if you call this industry of these assets, worth?
Yeah. So let me just, I'll dummy it down. I was just on a call with a large bank this morning, and they just really grilled me. So I would say, just to put things in perspective, the best of the best office buildings will reach $1,000 a square foot. You're seeing that in somewhere like a San Francisco, a Seattle, probably Manhattan, maybe a little bit more than that if it's what we call a trophy asset. When you're building out a data center, this is very much like the oil tanker, the airplane business. You are well over that threshold. So, that's one thing that really is challenging here. Not only do you have to get the scale in terms of getting multiple data centers, because, clients will generally have a requirement such that, like I said, central, west, east, you are building this, you're going speculatively. It's a little bit of a white knuckler because the numbers are so high. So it can get up to about $2,000 a foot in some markets where it's really expensive to build. But you're well surpassing those trophy office assets because of all the equipment. And again, the analogy I always use is the airplane analogy. It's very much the same.
Yeah, I mean, I used to live in New York City. Over there, Alex was like the big data center, and I know Google's got a number of them as well throughout the city. And I mean, those got to be pretty expensive. Now, Mark, you talked about the importance of fiber and being close to them in order to be able to prevent that latency. And I know these are all real estate professionals, but just to give you a little bit of background, latency is essentially when your video freezes, that's latency right there.
100%. Yep.
Yeah. So, and we're joined by our fan favorite, by the way. Jeremy is on his third panel for this conference. He's been doing some. We're grateful. Jeremy Ferkin, head of Western Region Operations for CenturyLink. That's a critical piece of this. This is your bread and butter here, Jeremy. So you don't have to talk about movies and economic diversity. You must be working with these guys. What are we missing anything here in Southern Nevada? Do we have the fiber and the infrastructure to be able to supply something like this?
No, I don't think you have to look very far. Obviously, Switch there has been very successful, and they certainly tout their connectivity that goes through their site. And I'm sure Jeremy can probably talk a lot deeper into that and the importance of it, and the availability of just more than one but several providers to be able to provide diversified routes for the companies. And it doesn't matter whether you're an e-commerce company, you're a banking company, and you could use from a transactional perspective. If you go to use your Visa card and it's not working, you pull out your American Express card. I mean, that's the finance world of, making sure you're always up. But I'd kind of throw it off to Jeremy to talk about the network that I'm well aware of exists in Vegas and has been a really good driver for bringing business and customers to the Switch data center.
I apologize for being a little bit late, guys. I had one or two other things going on, and one of them wasn't plowing snow. But I think the crazy thing that, and to your point, David, you just brought up on latency, I think one of the biggest fuel that is going to happen, and Vegas sits in a great place for it right now, is that little tiny thing, latency. Because the further you are away from your data, or the further whatever the application is, whether it's a drone or whether it's autonomous driving or whether it's surgery that may be being done with robotics, all of those kinds of things require latency to be not there. I mean, as instant as is humanly possible. And so we think in terms of 30 frames per second for our eyes. And latency, once you get over that 50 milliseconds, you start seeing impacts to high availability applications. So if I'm thinking about a car and needing to avoid latency as short as it possibly can be, and so what you've got to think through is how many times that network has to either touch another network or has to touch a switch to get to the data. And so the closer those data centers become, and really right as I joined, I apologize again, but right as Mark was talking about the value of that property, that, you know, think commercial A or premium real estate, data centers are going to drive that times a million, because the micro data center of the future is the platinum gold mine. So gold times platinum is where that value is. And the proximity to my data and proximity to the ability to use that information is what's going to fuel almost everything in the future. So it's great that we have lots of repositories and salt mines that we keep film content in and everything else. But the reality is I've got to have that data near instant, especially if we get into some of like what we talked about on the last panel, virtual training environments, where if I'm training law enforcement, I need to have a training environment that there isn't the latency between what I see on my screen, my hands moving back and forth. It's instant. I make that instant decision. And that becomes even more important for surgeries, and it becomes more important for, you start filling in all the blanks of where we think. And if, you know, Amazon does the drone technologies for delivery, making sure they don't kill my cat when they drop that drone right onto my front porch, right? So all those things mean data centers, and even mini data centers or micro data centers. So if I'm in commercial real estate, I'm thinking through, how do I convert some of my space to a high availability data center application? And that can drive fuel for real estate, but it also can drive fuel for technology and solutions that we provide.
Now, another big component about this, so there's two other elements to it. We don't have the water element. We can talk about it, but as we've been told by the Las Vegas Water Authority, or Las Vegas Southern Nevada Water Authority, we have water for the next 70 years or 50 years. We should be okay. But energy, electricity is a huge problem. And that energy and electricity is also a big part of the cooling and the whole thing. I mean, that is kind of the crux of it. I mean, think of data centers as an industrial space that's just has so much energy coursing through it and equipment. Jeff, you're working with Switch presumably, and probably both here, down here in Southern Nevada and up in Northern Nevada. What are we missing here to be able to get more of these data centers from an energy consumption perspective?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think be overly optimistic here, but I think we've got all the pieces in place to supply these types of facilities. We've got sites, we've got access to new high voltage transmission, which is typically the way these folks connect. Our company's making some investments in a couple of sites around the valley where it's kind of plug and play for these big folks. So I think from the infrastructure perspective, we're in pretty good shape in that area. Our system down there is relatively new, very reliable, and certainly we have the capability of supplying some very large customers. I think from the energy itself, more and more of these folks are coming and asking for renewable energy. So I think that's going to be an ever-growing trend over the future, where we have to develop products that will be able to supply them this renewable energy at 100%, right? And more so, I think we're hearing kind of the next trend is low carbon energy, right? So you could supply them the 100% renewable, but they want to see low carbon. So the access to our transmission system and various markets around Nevada will give us the ability to provide that kind of lower carbon piece. So I think we're in pretty good shape. I think you wouldn't see what's happening in Las Vegas happening without that infrastructure play.
Now, we are obviously going to be if we decide that we want to venture down this path and become a data center ground or a place competitive with the likes of the Phoenixes and the Utahs and the Californias. Raul, you're working out of Silicon Valley. You're talking to companies out there, and I presume that you cover other states besides California. I mean, do we have a competitive edge here, or does California kind of, are the scales more tipped in the favor of places like California in that, or in Phoenix?
Yeah. So look, here we're really fortunate here in Northern California to have a tremendous amount of logos. but it's very expensive here. So in the business, we refer to this as the total cost of occupancy. And so it is no accident that all these markets in the Western region, Utah, Nevada, Oregon, Arizona, they really draft off of California. And a lot of times the requirements that you see, again, going back to the latency is not as much of an issue anymore for some or a lot of requirements. It allows companies at a certain scale to justify leaving California because the cost differential is just too compelling. So you have a tangible example there in your market of one landlord in particular being very, very successful, and in large part because they do have a competitive advantage, which is their connectivity solution. So I would say that you guys have all the key attributes that you need to be successful. But what a user is going to do, and Mark can jump in because he's, it's near and dear in terms of Arizona, is when you get to that threshold where you want to save, the savings is there, they're really going to look at not just Nevada. They won't just look at Nevada. They will look at Utah very closely, and they will look at their options in Oregon and Washington State maybe, right? So they're going to total all this up, and a big part of it is going to just taxes or some of the incentives they get, but they're going to look at their total cost of occupancy. So I'm not dodging your question. I'm just letting you know that the competition will not just be in state, it will be these other states, because it's all a play of, hey, it needs to be cheaper than California. Where can I get that? And these other states do have those attributes as well.
I mean, there's very few places where you can get power. I mean, power is very expensive in Northern
Getting
California.
harder.
And to be able to get access to power in the time frames to be able to deliver. There's no doubt, Nevada certainly sits in a good place. I will say from our customers that look to providers to go into co-location, every one of them now is putting it on to the operator to be able to deliver affordable renewables as well as low carbon. And they're not saying, in 3 or 4 years ago, they'd say, we'd work with you, operator, to try to get that from the power provider. Now what they're saying is, we're not even going to consider you unless you can deliver that. Rob and Switch is 100%, they're 100% renewable. And it's not a question. Rob takes it upon himself to make sure that he's able to acquire that from the power company and deliver it to his customer. And that's what's happening across the country right now, is that to providers, the operators, if someone's going to go in and go into a co-location facility, they're putting it upon the operator, the developer, to be able to negotiate those contracts with the power providers. And another thing they're looking at is, in the past, you'd have to pay a premium for that. And I think right now the momentum is shifting where they believe that you should pay a premium for, dirty power and, for renewables and affordable, figure out a way that price should be lower. And that's what's going on in the industry. And I'm sure Jeff can, talk about that. His sister company is looking at that up in Utah. Utah is going through the same thing. You've got the large, hyperscalers, the Google, Microsoft, Facebook, Oracles. They're the ones driving that too.
One of the things I guess I would put out there for my fellow panelists, for Mark and Raul and possibly Jeff, so part of the scale that we look at and work with is you get the outliers, which I would go after, like a Cheyenne, Wyoming is an outlier. Microsoft building their massive data center there, cheap power, low taxes, et cetera, et cetera. And they've expanded that one 14 or 15 times.
Yeah.
And then you get the Eagle Mountains, where Facebook is there. And so but before Eagle Mountain happened, Facebook built a data center, same competition, between markets. It went to New Mexico, right?
Yep.
And so I guess I would put out there that a lot of times, and I sit on lots of the different economic development organizations, a lot of times it's not what so exact to your point, Mark, it's not what they are saying out loud. You've got to listen behind the scenes what they're really trying to get, because data centers are a lot like banks. They're where the people are, and they're where the content is, or they're on a path for a reason. And so maybe the two of you might want to jump in, instead of me saying that, because I actually sit with some of these companies in their offices, and I can't say some of those things. So maybe you guys might.
Sure. I mean, take a look at just, you can look at Phoenix just in the last 24 months. Microsoft building 3 large data center campuses. They, purchased over 800 acres. You also have Google that acquired a large platform. You've got Oracle that has really expanded. So the cloud has come to Phoenix very quickly in a very short period of time. You obviously have a population. You've got businesses that are looking for that connectivity. Raul, some of the other areas. I mean, there's a reason why Facebook went to Utah. They tried to go to Utah and then decided to put that on hold, and they went down to New Mexico, and hence, since then have come back to Utah. Raul, I don't know if you can expand on that, but
look, I think what Jeremy's getting at, I don't want to get myself in trouble, saying things I shouldn't say, but I mean, this is part of so I'm not a network, architecture engineer.
1 second. If I could have you guys throw chairs at each other, I'd do it, but
Yeah. So look, I want to circle back to something that's really important, and I'm going to answer this question as best I can. So going back to something distinguishing about Nevada, most of the absorption in this, they're technology companies. Most of the absorption by those technology companies are the 3 large cloud providers. And going back to what Jeremy and Mark was saying, and relevant to Jeff, is you do need that clean power. That's really important to them. That is part of their cultural DNA. It is something that it's not going away anytime soon, and they're getting to be very shrewd. But let's go back to your question. So what I would say is I distinguish this business in terms of now data center operators and then the users, and it's really those same 3 cloud companies that are self-performing and doing their own data centers. So there's distinguishing characteristics there. So I'm going to make a generalization for the data center operators. They're not going to go to these smaller markets. They will not do that because they are trying to capture the business that's servicing those MSAs. And on the back end, this is still the real estate business. So when you're trying to exit this, with all due respect to some of these other markets you were mentioning, you're just not going to get a lot of people interested on the back end. Okay. So that's for the operators. With respect to the groups that you're talking about, like the large, Facebook, Microsoft, Google, I'm not speaking out of school here. They are going to these states and they are bifurcating their design, and they are putting these big data centers where they can get a lot of incentives. They don't need anyone to negotiate that stuff for them. They're going to do better than any data center operator is going to do. And they're very sophisticated utility buyers. They know that's a big thing now in this business, is it's getting harder and harder to get the power necessary to build data centers. So they are looking backwards at, okay, we know these states have this here. I know that going back to one of the key things that Jeremy said, this isn't as latency sensitive. Why not go and put this in a cheaper market? It's almost like a back office type of play. I don't need to be in Manhattan with this. So most of those things they're talking about are those type of dynamics. Third-party operators would not go to those markets because there's just not enough demand. So I don't think that's going away anytime soon. I think you're going to start seeing this in other countries because right now Western Europe is very hot. They're playing a little catch up. It's just like California, where the barriers to entry are very high in terms of costs and environmentally sensitive issues. Then you're going to start seeing them, again, negotiate directly with countries like Ireland, and they're going to put a big data center there because they can do that themselves better than an operator from a cost standpoint. So I don't know if that answers your question. And again, I don't want to get in trouble. This is for the, but that is effectively why you see that distinction, the bifurcation of the requirements.
Well, is there also the element, this seems to be kind of the way, given right now the situation economically and the situation that developers are in, is there also the issue of capital outlay and the potential losses, in other words, no return on investment if you enter a market where you can't dispose of the asset, where people are like, we're just not interested. Is there sort of a lack of foresight right now because we're so in flux, or is this just something that's going on all the time, regardless of whether there's a pandemic or not?
I think it's a thing that goes on regardless if there's a pandemic, because these groups are so sophisticated, and it is a cost of capital exercise. It's just they just know. It goes back to what I said. It's like, hey, I can do this here. My time to market is quicker. Why wouldn't I? Again, I hate to use the office analogy. In the back office, it's like, we don't need to put this requirement in Manhattan or downtown San Francisco. I can accomplish this here. This doesn't have anything to do with the pandemic. They were doing this before. I just see that they're getting more sophisticated, and it is completely a cost of capital play.
Hey, David, one of the things, and I think something that Jeff and Raul and I are very comfortable with, is NPV models and ROI and IRR and things like that. If I was to take off my hat without trying to get in trouble, since Raul's been a good example for not getting in trouble, I'll try not to as well. But when you think in terms of the hyperscalers and you think in terms of those kind of companies, IRR, NPV, and ROI are not in their top three things they're thinking about. They're thinking about speed to market, they're thinking about reliability, and they're thinking about scalability. And so if you think through all of those companies that Raul mentioned, I didn't, teasing, of course. So
it's all public.
Every one of the data centers that they built, before they completed final brick, they expanded. And they're expanding again, and they're expanding again, and they're expanding again. And so wherever they're going to go, they have to have the ability to expand exponentially. And it sounds nirvanic, but it's real. And so, but they also have to have, and you've heard a common theme from me, David, in several panels, is they also have to have availability to talent to scale with them. And so not only location, but talent to grow with them, and being able to then have, so power is critical. Bandwidth is virtually unlimited once I get glass to you, and I have redundant glass and those kind of things. And I say I as industry. So those kind of things are availability to talent, but then also we've got to think differently on how we even market to those people, because those people are focused on scale, speed to market, contractors. Can I get reliable contractors who are going to build this thing? If I can't get them locally, I'm bringing them in because they can do that. So huge impacts in a different way to even look at.
Jeremy hit it. It's the talent pool that seems to be the most challenging thing from a hyperscaler to your data center, co-location operators. The growth, there's just not enough talent there to tap into. So they are looking at areas that have, the infrastructure of universities, junior, colleges. Not everyone needs a 4-year degree to do this. These are people that can get in there, build, and take care of this equipment for these facilities. And we're even reaching out to, the high schools right now from a I'm with 7x24. And one of the things we're doing is encouraging and educating from the high school level for getting these electricians and mechanical, engineers to be able to come in. And, Phoenix has been a good benefactor of that because we do have a good talent pool here. And instead of people graduating and leaving the state, they're staying here. So we do have a good talent pool here in Arizona. But in some of those remote areas, Albuquerque, for example, where's that talent coming from? So to your point, Jeremy, it's important today, and it's ever more important going forward because data centers aren't slowing down.
It's funny hearing this because throughout this whole conference, the big thing that's been going on is there's a pause, and that seems to be kind of the overall consensus is uncertainty. There's a pause, but this market now, this is the first panel I think where we've heard this is where money is still flowing. We just seem to we have the pieces, we just seem to be able to put them together too well here in Las Vegas. So as data center experts, and I'm particularly pointing out you, Mark, and you, Raul, what do we need to do to make sure that to see if this could even happen? I mean, I'm looking at the Las Vegas Strip. I mean, we're in trouble. Well, our entertainment is pretty much done for the moment. We may not have fans at Raiders Stadium or at Allegiant Stadium, and that is the bread and butter of what we do here. How do we break into this market?
I was on a call last week, a conference, sat on a panel, and gentleman, Dean Nelson, who's, been in this industry a long, long time. He said the companies that were looking at, what they're going to be doing in 3 years got all of a sudden accelerated into 3 months. And I'd have to say that it's so true. I mean, and again, we're talking about, this industry, a lot of money flowing into it. And now people have, changed the way they eat out. They get deliveries now. So there's a lot of additional services now that people are getting used to now, and it's the new way. And I think everything that expedites that goes through a data center, and therefore, we'll be playing catch up again for quite some time, is what the conversation was last week. And the technology is there. It's just been accelerated as to how the public is going to begin to use it. You talk about your deliveries. The deliveries that are going to be, flown to us, driverless cars. That's a reality. It's happening, and it's going to happen faster. We talked about the helicopter, flying in and bringing people. People are living outside the city, and they're going to be flying in. It's just that is the technology that we're all going to be seeing over the next 3 to 5 years. I wouldn't have thought it would come that quickly, but it is.
Hey, David, I'd jump in real quick here and talk. This goes back to Jeremy's thoughts on kind of these hyperscales and how we market to these folks. I think we've got to get the word out, and those have to be comprehensive packages to folks like Raul and Mark and others in this industry. But I think we have to show the sites that we have available in Southern Nevada, the scalability, the renewable energy, the fiber connectivity, and we need to make sure that these folks have that readily available when they're out shopping for sites. And we're pretty active in that right now through most of these folks. But certainly, I think we could do a better job of making sure we get that information out.
Right. The affordability of your land. If you look at Phoenix, one thing Phoenix has a lot of is land. Dallas has a lot of land. Whether you pay $3 a foot for land or $10 a foot, that doesn't really move the needle that much. But when you're looking at Virginia and you're looking at paying $1 million, $2 million an acre, those costs are real costs. And the companies that are out there have to be there. But those that have alternatives, such as like a Vegas, you've got affordable land still. There's some areas that, 5 acre land or $5 land to 10 acre land. The difference there is how close Jeff can, get you to the power and have that power delivered to you, at a shorter distance. And the fiber, you take a look at your big hyperscaler that just built out there. There's reasons why others want to cluster around them, because the connectivity, it has gone out to that hyperscaler, and there are some great sites around that area. And, I've worked with Jeff with several people looking.
Yeah, I just say, that was one of our strategies when we build these big switch yards like we've done in we are building in North Las Vegas, or we build in Henderson. Those are plug and play opportunities for these big guys, right? So that limits their cost of development up front to be able to tap into that heavy infrastructure and get their energy needs.
So what I would say to that, David, if I can have 30 seconds on this, is
just be careful what you say.
Yeah, we refer to it here as in our company, this is a solution sale. And so there's two things I would emphasize. First, know your competition, which are these neighboring states, and what they offer relative to these key attributes we've been discussing. But then the second thing is work together with all the agencies that an operator or a self-performer user is going to touch. And when you have all that in concert, that goes back to the time to market discussion. Because, for example, we mentioned this, the utility procurement is getting harder and harder. But if you are able to go there and someone's like, hey, this is why this is a good site for you. There's fiber here. The utility provider is going to cooperate with you. and there's, to Mark's point, there's like 5 different available parcels in this immediate area, which you can aggregate. It makes it a lot more compelling and easier, okay, versus sometimes you go to states and it's not necessarily. So all I would say is working together, time to market is really important, and it will be a key advantage for you. I'm not a big believer of, your tagline being we're cheaper. You know what I mean? That cost, that is not the competitive advantage. Is we are a facilitator when we make it easy to do business here. That is really important. So that's my answer to that question.
I may have a question in my head after I ask this question, so I apologize. But why is it easy for Switch to do business in this town and in this state? And by the way, if I end up dead tomorrow, Rob Roy, you go after that guy. Why is it easy for Switch to do business in this town and for other companies not to? Is there something that we don't know? Is there something that's not?
Rob has continually built ahead of schedule and continues to do that. He's in a great location. He controls the connectivity that's coming through that, and that's really his advantage. He's listened to his customers when it's come to power costs and the type of power, and he has built a very reliable facility. All of my customers that are in there, Rob's never gone down. And to a data center user that's, reliability is 100%, Rob is very reliable. And he's been the driving force for Nevada, especially with his expansion up to Reno. So I think there's 1 or 2 other providers that have entered that market. I think will change over time. For right now, some of the other national operators have found other areas to continue to expand in versus going into Vegas. But I think you'll continue to see the successes that Rob has had continue to grow. Rob's got quite a bit of expansion capability continuing. And I think the hyperscale that went in there, the cloud providers that are there, they're not taking share away from Rob. They're just an additional service that customers have. I have several of my customers. I don't think I've got one customer that's gone 100% cloud. They all have a percentage of their business that can and is being guided to cloud, but there's always a core that's going to remain, in a co-location facility. There's very few enterprise data centers that are continuing to operate their own. Those enterprise data centers are really, doing a sale leaseback or moving completely into a co-location operator to run their data center in IT.
If I was to summarize what Raul really communicated, and keep me honest if I'm misstating what you said, Raul, ultimately they need someone that has relationships vertical stack politically, and they need someone that when they talk to the governor, they hear the same thing as when they talk to the mayor, as when they talk to the ED group, and it's all in sync. And if that isn't in place, people move because they know there's drama and they don't need drama. They know that if they're not hearing the same thing from Mayor Walker, like we heard yesterday, that they're hearing, they'll move a data center to a different location because guess what they can't afford is my permits got held up and my opportunity is now walking away. And so the more you can facilitate that relationship development, the more it works. And you've heard me say that numerous times, David, that everybody has to be talking the same story. And I could give you locations. I'll just give you a scenario. We had a very large data center that was looking to be built in a location. They moved to a different location purely because thought the story, saying we could be any state that I work in, and it's a lot of them. We thought they wanted cost, which is what David put out there, is it's not the low cost. They wanted time to market. They wanted to be in faster, installed faster, and up faster, and power ready, and redundancy available, and a coordinated effort between building fiber and building power. And they wanted to see that, everybody nodding their heads at the same time, and yep, we're focused. And when they don't see that, that is a red flag that they will all run from nearly instantly. Just, I could be wrong. I'm looking for Raul
you nailed
to
it.
give me the yes.
You nailed it. And I would say that going back to your question, the first question you asked me in terms of, hey, how much does this stuff cost to build? All things removed, what Jeremy spoke about, you're still building an airplane. So it takes a long time. So they need this thing up and serviceable because that's how they monetize. There isn't generally pre-leasing in this business from an operator standpoint. Someone's not going to come in and be like, hey, you're going to maybe build that. I'm going to lease this from you. It is a time to market exercise across the board as well, for the operators as well as for the self-performers.
And that consistency also plays, and Jeff knows this, if a, users coming in and they're a heavy power user, they're going to want very similar type of incentives in pricing that their neighbor has been able to get. And I know that everybody's held to these confidentiality agreements, and we respect that. But at the end of the day, they'd like to have that same type of, equal playing field from a cost perspective. That's one utility that, that shouldn't be a reason why it shouldn't be consistent. If they're going to step up and acquire an amount of power and use it, there should be similar economics to be able to be achieved. And I think that's fairly consistent. We found that to be the case. I'll use Phoenix as an example. We've got Salt River Project and we've got APS. And for the most part, you would think that they'd be very competitive in terms of rate, but there were some challenges with one of those providers being able to, confirm availability of the ability to do some renewables, and it went to another area. And there's defined areas of where one provider, is able to provide services, and the other, and they lost out on a very sizable transaction. Now, since then, they've gotten more competitive, but it's not just the price. It's how can we deliver in joint projects for renewables, whether that be solar or several other different options that are out there.
I was going to agree with that, Mark. I think the consistency is certainly important, but I think you have to, in these agreements that we're working on with some of these folks, there has to be a level of flexibility to meet their goals as well. And so I think you have to work really hard to make sure that whatever we design to procure and provide them energy, that it has to be flexible enough to not only meet their goals, but there's different goals by any one of these different companies, right? And so we have to make sure as a utility that we work pretty hard to make sure that flexibility exists for all of them.
Right. It's a partnership that you have to enter into.
Absolutely.
I would say exact down the path that Jeff just mentioned. It's easy for big utilities, whether it's telco, power, whatever it may be, to say, this is our model. And having that relationship with those entities is transformative for a community. We have had several situations with some of the large hyperscalers, and can't name names, but where we have gone in and created a completely different business model that they may want us to do X, Y, or Z. And I guarantee Jeff has had to do the same exact thing, because our build the capital, we set a plan in August, September, October, our capital's assigned, and then we go do that. The reality is, if we want that business and we want that in our communities versus another community, we've got to be flexible with you, the community, to go drive that behavior. And that takes a partnership, once again, where everybody's doing this. And if not everybody's doing this, forget it. It just doesn't work.
I'm going to throw a hand grenade in the room and just make a comment. It's just my opinion, and it might be politically charged, but it's not meant to be political. I'm looking out the window here. I can see Allegiant Stadium. It was completed. We were awarded the Raiders in second half of 2016, or told that they were going to be moving. Stadium's pretty much complete. We're coming in on the opening day, late August. You look at the city of Henderson, and a shout out again to Dan Stewart from the city of Henderson. I mean, they were able to get that Google data center project done quickly. They work with the governor's office. They work with local government. They were able to provide the infrastructure for it. So, to your point, yes, it's absolutely about all being on board. And I almost kind of wonder, and again, I'm not trying to be political here, but it's almost like something that's preventing us from going down that path. And it has nothing to do with Jeff. It has
No, not at all.
I'm
I
not,
won't take it personal.
not throwing it in, but it almost seems like there's something that's preventing it from happening. And you guys are on the ground. You probably have a much better idea than I do. And that's just my observation.
I just going to jump in real quick. I'm sorry, Raul, but I'm not sure. I mean, we've seen some pretty good success over the last couple of years. I mean, and I think and I mentioned the Cirrus project out in North Las Vegas, another group that's coming into the market. So I'm not sure how we're measuring our success, but I think we're doing fairly well considering, this market really didn't have a whole lot of it other than Switch, not more than a couple of years ago.
100% agree.
I would say, yeah. I mean, so from where I sit, Oregon, which I'm a big fan of that market for certain reasons. I have been for a long time. They got some mojo really in the last 2 years. For a period of time there, I felt that it was underappreciated. But part of it's awareness. Now, the good news for you guys there locally is all you need to do is to spend time in the Bay Area up to Seattle, and that's your audience. Right? There's not a lot of, there aren't a lot of companies you need to call on. You just really need to spend time, educate them about, it's kind of what everyone's been talking about here, a partnership to learn more of what helps them. Right. And then ultimately, I think you will succeed. So part of it is, David, they only have so much bandwidth, right? They're looking at all these different projects all over the place. And it's a level of education, but you guys have some great things going for you there. So and again, you just Mark and I have many colleagues. It's just like it's all Bay Area logos up to Seattle. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, you bet. And I tell you, our team's pretty active on those discussions from Bay Area all the way to Seattle. This is an important industry for us for obvious reasons. But the other part of this that we like is this, this makes the pie bigger, right? So this is a good benefit to all of our customers.
All right, we've got a couple minutes left. Data center future, if anyone wants to give me a quick 20-second blurb on what the future of data centers, for particularly Southern Nevada, might look like. Do we have a chance as we try to pivot and expand our economic makeup?
Yeah, I'll jump in real quick. I think this industry is going to grow in Southern Nevada. I think, as mentioned, and I certainly don't want to just plug NV Energy, but I think we've certainly found that we need to be flexible, and we've created programs to be able to do that. We've found sites that are ready to go for development, plug-and-play situations. We've worked with folks like Cirrus and these other hyperscalers to make sure that we have a dedicated team to provide them the ability to get up and running and hit their time frames. And so we're pretty bullish on this industry. I know Mark and Raul will tell you this industry is growing. We think there's a lot of room in Southern Nevada to accommodate it.
I would agree with Jeff. I think I've spoken enough to say that Southern Nevada is going to continue to grow and expand.
The only thing I'd add, I don't see this thing slowing down on a macro perspective. And sorry for the construction. The only thing is, I was an econ major and I went to business school. The one thing I would say is, in any market where you have one dominant player, that doesn't generally last very long. That's all I'll say. So I would bet on more opportunity for more groups to come in, and California's not getting any cheaper anytime soon. So that's another thing that I think will help.
And looking forward to the Raiders playing out there too. I'm looking forward to that invite to come visit out there.
Look at that. Look at sticking your hand out. I like that, Mark. I was waiting for that.
The only thing I'd put in there, David, really just as a underscore to everything that's been communicated. The world is not going away from data. Therefore, it's going more towards it. That's an inherently stupid point to make, except for one thing. If you believe in scarcity or opportunity mindset, it will dictate how much you accelerate in this space. If you are telling all those logos from Bay Area North or wherever it may be, or the ones that are growing organically in other areas, if you are going to them with a plan, with a path, and it's believable, you're going to grow with them. If you go to them with, here's the obstacles you've got to help us overcome, they're going to go next, because their opportunity is anywhere. Their customers are everywhere. And that's the available marketplace for them. The communities that make it easier for them to operate are the ones that are going to win, period. End of story.
Well said. Our fan favorite, by the way, Jeremy Ferkin, third panel. I'm going to give you like a trophy.
That's the solution sale. That's the solution sale right there.
Gentlemen, I want to thank each and every one of you for your input. I really appreciate it. This is a fascinating conversation. It's something close to my heart. I love to talk about the diversification of the economy here in Las Vegas or in Southern Nevada. And this one is one where I think we could possibly win. And I hope that one day we're able to be able to brag about how we do have hyperscale data centers and more colo facilities and more enterprise data centers out here. So thank you again. I appreciate it. Have a great